Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be going over the 10-11 support tier list. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Check out the rest of the content as well. I did a jungle tier list either yesterday or the day before, and we have lots and lots of other content on the channel as well. Individual champion guides, tier list, patch notes on every patch, topical guides like best one tricks, how to macro better, how to micro better, pick dodge, does luck exist in League of Legends. Tons and tons of content, and we stream every night, starting around midnight these days, Eastern Standard Time, usually going till about 4 or 5 a.m. My sleep schedule is a little erratic because of the whole virus situation and taking care of my daughter during the day, and then staying up all night, but streaming, but that's usually about when we're starting. So come by, check it out. It's really friendly. I try to explain as much as I can while I'm playing, and then I also try to hold a conversation with any questions or, you know, fun stories that you might have as well. But okay, let's go ahead and get in here. And you can find access to this Google Doc in the description. And within this Google Doc, it'll not only tell you the rankings, but if you click on each champion, it has a little mini Google Doc. And this will tell you recommended runes, recommended items, and then a 1 to 5 rating system. 1 being the champion is one of the worst at that task. 4 is support, 5 being the champion is one of the best. So lane pressures, how well can the champion pressure the lane, get priority, make plays off of that. Kill threat, how likely is it the champion can cause a kill in the lane. Safety, how safe is the champion, particularly from early ganks. Scaling is how well does the champion perform over time. And then reliability is how likely is it that someone can perform well in this champion with a moderate amount of practice. So some of that is how hard are they to play in terms of mechanics and decision making. And some of it also is how well do they fit into the meta. Does it work really well with other popular champs? Does it counter popular champs that might be on the enemy team? Does it play well when it's behind? Does it play well when it's ahead? Can it press its advantage? So all those kind of things. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So I think that number 1 right now is going to be Yumi. I know Jolty's going to be rolling over in his grave about this. And Yumi is one of the more enigmatic supports out there because she never has a very high win rate. Yet everyone's going to say that she's OP for the most part, especially high-end pro players. But even lower elo brackets, you can see she's banned 50% of the time. That's probably one of the most banned champions right now in League of Legends. If we pick on main ban, she's literally the most banned champion right now in League of Legends by a pretty wide margin, even more than Darius. You got to wonder, well, what is that? Sometimes champions can be banned because they have a really annoying mechanic that people just don't like to mess with, like Morgana's Black Shield or you know, like Yasuo's Wind Wall, that type of stuff. But then sometimes they are banned because the best case scenario with that champion is just too strong. It doesn't mean that they win every game, but it means that when they get rolling a lot of times, they're just too strong and they're just too difficult to deal with. So that's kind of where stuff like the Kassadin comes in. That's where Darius comes in. So it's not, and then sometimes you just don't want them on your team, like Volibear. But anyway, so she's really enigmatic. So what's up with that? Why does she have a 49% win rate? Almost basically a 50% win rate and a high pick rate at 14%, but then she also has a really high ban rate. Well, a lot of it comes down to she's a lot more difficult to play than people think she is, and the best case scenario with her is just way too strong. But if you get a decent amount of practice with her, then it is highly likely you're going to get to a really good case scenario with her. So let's see what's up with that here just really quick. Look at a couple of her abilities. The main thing that really jumps out and why a lot of, especially high-end players, really hate this champion is that she's an enchanter who is extremely safe. And that sort of violates, you know, kind of the bro code of supports in pro, is that you can't really play enchanters because if you do, they're unsafe. You will get punished. Junglers can camp you and punish you for playing those champs. So that kind of forces you into playing Braum or Tom. Right, a lot of times. Just something that's tanky, something that's safe, something that's difficult to gank. And the reason why there's this sort of dichotomy is enchanters scale extremely well. There's some of the highest scaling champions in the whole game. People don't think about that. I've got entire videos on that, but a lot of it is because of the stat plus healing and shielding. As I've said before, numerous times over the years, Plus healing and shielding is probably the most powerful stat in the game, and the main reason for that is because it works with resistances rather than against resistances. So if you heal a target who has, let's say, 1000 HP and 100 armor, typically when someone does 100 armor, it's going to take 100% more physical damage to kill that person. So they effectively have 2000 HP in terms of physical damage, right? Because it takes 100% more damage. The way that this shows up mathematically, when you look at armor, 100 armor reduces damage by 50%. Therefore, it takes twice as much to kill somebody. So the easiest way to think of it is every piece of armor or every piece of magic resist requires 1% extra to equate to 1 HP in damage, right? So it's going to take 2 points of physical damage, 100% extra damage to take away 1 point of HP. All right, so simple enough, simple math. Well, what plus healing and shielding does is, in that scenario, if you heal somebody for 300 and they have 100 armor, it's not just a 300 heal. Now it's basically a 600 heal against physical damage, if you want to think about it like that. They have to do 600 physical damage to counteract your 300 heal that you just gave that person, because they have resistances, right? It takes more. It's not equal. It's not 1-to-1. It's not 300 damage to counteract a 300 heal. It has to go through the armor. It has to go through the magic resist. Their damage does, right? So that's why, in a lot of cases, it scales even harder than just flat damage, right? Because if you were to do 300 physical damage to somebody that has 100 armor, you would only actually do 150 damage because it would get reduced. But if you give them a 300 heal, instead of doing 300 damage, then you give them an effective 600 health against physical damage. So in that sense, it's very loose, but plus healing and shielding can scale up to 4 times more than just normal damage. So that's why champions like Yuumi, Soraka, Janna, things like that can feel really oppressive, and that's why they usually have high win rates. Now, Yumi's an exception to that because she's difficult to play. We'll talk about that here in a second. But that's why historically the highest win rate champions of all time, things like Janna, things like Sona, have those high win rates, is because just their raw stats are extremely strong because of plus healing and shielding. Now factor that with plus healing and shielding items are extremely cost efficient, right? When we look at something like Ardent Sensor here, which is very common. You're paying 2,300 gold, and just right out the gate, you're getting 2,700 gold value, not even including any of its passive, any of its buffs, right? So it's very cheap to buy, and it gives you an enormous amount of value for that. And they usually have really good actives or really good passives. So if we look at an ally buff here, if you're just buffing, one ally, total gold, one ally plus caster buffed with the lowest amount you could possibly get, then it goes to 3,400 gold. So right there, it's already approaching 200% efficiency. It's probably like 180% efficient. Gold plus one ally at maximum rank is 5,200, right? So this tells you right here, up to almost 400% gold efficiency, right? So if you think about that, if you pay 2,300 for this, and let's say that just in a I don't know, just a normal scenario, maybe you're getting, let's just be conservative and say you're getting 200%, right? Then you're effectively getting 2,300 extra gold, which is the equivalent of 7 kills and some change, unassisted kills, right? Because it kills about 300 gold. So that means that you are effectively bringing 7 extra kills to your team in terms of power, just because your item is very efficient and very powerful, right? And it can scale all the way up to 389%. And the way that this works as well is how the plus healing and shielding stacks with ability power usually, with the base power on the spells, and with other things like Revitalize and things like that. It gets very, very crazy with the amount of scaling that goes on with something. So if you look at like a, let's say you have like a, well, we could just use actual numbers here on Yuumi, right? let's say that you have your zoomies here, 210, and let's say that you have 100 ability power and 20% plus healing and shielding. You'd probably have more than that at some point, but just as a conservative number, it checks the baseline and then adds in the ability power. So that's going to be times 40, right? Or plus 40. So you have 100 ability power at a 0.4 ratio. So it's 250. And then if you have the 20% plus healing and shielding times 1.2, then it ends up being a 300 heal. And so you can see it starts to like multiply as you get more and more AP, as you get more and more plus healing and shielding. If you take Revitalize, which sometimes people will take on Yuumi, if they have Revitalize, imagine they have a Spirit Visage, which is a very common item right now. Imagine it's like Red Cane with a Spirit Visage, then you would multiply that again times an extra 30%, and then all of a sudden you have 390 if they have Spirit Visage. And so the numbers can just get really wacky really quickly with a lot of the other items and a lot of the other power going on out there right now. So that's part of it, is it works really well with resistances, and you get that sort of triple scaling there, right? Sometimes even more than that if you add in things like Spirit Visage, Revitalize, and stuff like that. But you have a base heal, you have an AP ratio typically, and then you also have plus healing and shielding on top of that. And on something like an Athene's, it's going to give you even extra power, because that healing is also going to get multiplied by your plus healing and shielding. It's also going to get multiplied, you know, by things like Revitalize and Spirit Visage. It doesn't have an AP ratio on it, but your AP ratio does indirectly feed it because you do more damage with your abilities, which stack up your Athenes faster and all that. So all of these items, the bottom line is the scaling is just through the roof on these champions because it works with resistances. It, you know, has multiple avenues of scaling with AP, plus healing and shielding, various items and runes out there. And they're very, very cheap and very cost-efficient items. So you get them faster and they scale harder in the long run. So the itemization is just the best on enchanters. So that just violates a lot of the, like, the rules of pro play. And that's why a lot of pros hate enchanters, is because they just end the game. Like, just their stat sticks. I mean, they do stuff too, but just the raw number of just stats, the numbers that they give people are just really, really high, and they can just take over games. I mean, you know, a lot of it becomes all about the support. You have to kill the support, you have to kill the Yuumi, or you have to kill the Sona or the Soraka, or you're just not going to win the fight. I mean, that's how a lot of supports can, like, ultra hard carry, is just through these raw stats. And Yuumi is a special case here. Not only does she have a heal in her kit, but the biggest thing about her is she cannot be targeted, right? If you are attached to somebody, you can't kill her, so she doesn't get penalized for being squishy. So you can get all of these little squishy items, and they're never going to kill you a lot of times unless they kill everybody else in the team fight, because not only can you attach to one person, you can jump around and attach to everybody else, so you're always going to be there adding value to your team until you're the last person standing most of the time. Now, sometimes they might catch you out through sort of an error of your own. Sometimes it happens with Yuumi, and that's why she probably has a lower win rate, is if she does get caught, she is going to die, right? A lot of times, if they flay her or just do anything to knock her out, then she's her reattach is disabled for 5 seconds, and she's probably going to die. But if you're you know, playing her properly, then you're not going to get caught that much. So she basically turns into a mega tank because she has the effective health of everyone in the team fight. You have to kill everyone before you can get to her a lot of the time. And she still scales like that. Versus other champs, you know, like a Sona or a Soraka or something like that. You can get on them, right? If you're Zed or you're Talon or, you know, something like that, you can go in and assassinate them. And that's the trade-off, is they're risky, right? They're going to be squishy. If you go for all of these enchanter things, you know, it's going to be difficult to ward. You can't face check bushes. If you get jumped by an assassin, you're going to die. It's difficult to rotate. All of these things are drawbacks, and that's why you don't see enchanters in pro a lot, is because a lot of times you need that tank who can walk up and face check that bush to see if they're at Baron, right? To put down those wards. And someone who's not a liability, who can't be assassinated. You know, and so that's why you've seen like Braum and Tom forever, with some occasional sprinkles of some other tanks in there. But whenever enchanters start getting into the meta, pros really don't like it, and they start getting, start getting a little antsy, and that's why everyone hates Yumi, is because she is untargetable, basically. She's pretty much unkillable in a lot of circumstances, and that violates the rules of enchanters. She doesn't have that risk anymore if you're playing her properly a lot of the time. So that's one thing about her. Another thing is that not only is this a heal, but it also speeds people up for usually somewhere in the neighborhood of like between 25 and 40% for 3 seconds non-decaying. So it basically gives them a burst of speed, it heals them, and it gives them 25 or up to 45% bonus attack speed. So these are just like astronomical amount of stats. I mean, 45% bonus attack speed, I think it's like 1,000 gold worth of value. Yeah, about 1,100 gold worth of value. And that can also attach Ardent Sensor to people, give out that buff. The movement speed, I don't even know. It's valuable. And it ends up being on an 8-second cooldown. So it's a respectable heal. Not the biggest in the world, but pretty good. And bonus attack speed and bonus movement speed. You have the attachment, which not only makes you pretty much invulnerable when you're attached to people, but also hands out extra ability power and attack damage. Now, this is something that changed too that a lot of people aren't really aware of, is that the attachment is based on the person that the bonuses are based on the person you're attached to. It has nothing to do with your stats whatsoever anymore. Okay? So if you read it here, Yumi and her anchor gain flat adaptive force plus a percentage of the anchors, and they even put it in italics, adaptive force. Alright? So they changed this. It used to be, if you were attached to your ADC, they got a percentage of your stats, and then you got a percentage of their stats. Now it's always they get an extra percentage of their own stats, and you get a percentage of their stats. So what does this mean? This means you can go for more enchanter items like a Redemption, like a Mikhail's, and you're not affecting the scaling on the W whatsoever anymore. You don't have to get Death Cap. You don't have to get Ludens anymore to help your ADC scale. It doesn't matter. That doesn't affect your ADC or the mage you're attached to or anybody else. That only affects you. And your AP ratios are fairly low, right? You've got only a 0.4 on your zoomies. And you've got a 0.4 on your empowered Q. So she really doesn't scale that well with AP. It's okay. It's not terrible, but you don't have to buy things like Ludens or Death Cap or anything like that anymore to be effective on her. So that means she can go even cheaper. She can go for a Mikhail's right now. She can go for the Redemption. She can go for a Shirelia's if she wants to. So I think that's really liberating, and the baseline is really high. So it is your adaptive force. You only put 1 point in this in the vast majority of games. It's 12. So you get 12 ability power on the house for free, and so does your the person you're attached to, or the equivalent in attack damage. And then it's based on 12% of their total stats. So that's a really, really good 1-point wonder. Then you have like some decent harass early on with your Prowling Projectile. This has been nerfed a lot, so her early game harass is not nearly as great as it used to be, but it's still okay. You know, you can land this over time, and it's pretty good. You know, it's usually like maybe 2 or 3% of the target's current health, so if they have like 600 health, and it's 3%, that's 18 damage plus... you know, like 85 at level 3, so that's like 103 damage, and then you add on your Scorch and your Airy and your Cut Down, and it does pretty decent little poke. Now, it is like very, very expensive, right? The mana cost is 90 early on, but you can get some of your mana back from Bop and Block, and it does give you a shield as well, and that's a pretty big shield. Even later on in the game, right, if you're like level 9, you can get a 180 shield if you jump off, auto attack, and then reattach to somebody, so... it's a decent little maneuver. And then she also has her ultimate, which is basically just like a huge like Sona ult on steroids. It's a much bigger hitbox. I'm pretty sure it's a lower cooldown. It might be about the same cooldown. Does more damage, I believe, and it's a lot harder to flash out of, right? If you just straight flash a Sona ult, then you're all good. But Yumi can like follow you and make sure that she gets those 3 bolts. You have to dodge her for 3.5 seconds. In order to not get rooted, and the root is longer. It's a 1.75. Now, it's not a stun, it's a root, which enables them to do a couple more things, but still, it's really, really good. So, she's got a pretty good engage here, the long range, 1100 range, that's a little bit shorter than a blitz hook. It's about where a thresh hook is. So it's a very long range on the final chapter. You can speed people up, you can heal them, you give them bonus attack speed, you're unkillable, you give out free bonus stats to everybody, you have a homing missile you can harass with in the laning phase, you get an extra shield for yourself and like free mana regen. You build some of the cheapest, most powerful items in the game and you scale extremely well with them. And you don't have to buy boots because you're attached to somebody else. So that's another, you know, at least 1,100 gold in your pocket, right? If you get the Ionian boots. So I think Ionians might actually be 900 total. I think they're 900. But either way, that's free. You don't have to spend that. So you can get boots if you need to, but I've been trying like the no boot builds, and I think that that's still really good. That opens up an extra item slot too, where you can get even more items in the late game, but that's 900 gold faster. You're going to get Athenes, you're going to get Ardent Censer, all of that stuff. So that's what makes her so good. It's just like the raw stats on her. She's unkillable, and she's got all of this just stuff that just increases the power of your teammates. So yeah, I think she's really good. You do have to practice her. Once again, she has kind of a lower win rate because people will get caught. They'll try to ward when they shouldn't. They'll try to rotate when they shouldn't. They will, you know, greed out if someone's about to tower dive, an int, you know, and suicide. Sometimes the Yuumi will stay attached and die too. You got to abandon those people and just walk away. But if played properly, she can be super strong. So I think that just the standard Airy, Mana Flow, Absolute Focus, Scorch, and then just Presence of Mind and Cut Down. And I have gone back to like a Scorch build because Gathering Storm doesn't make a lot of sense. You don't have great AP ratios anyways, and you're already going to be super good late game. So I think just going for Absolute Focus is really good. Airy is clutch. You really want Airy instead of Comet, I think, because once you get Ardent Censer, which usually get you first two items, usually it's Athenes, then Ardent Censer. Whenever you attach to somebody, that does trigger Airy, and so that will put Ardent Censer on multiple people very comfortably in team fights. And it's just a really good, you know, combination where it gives you nice harass early on and good consistent additional shielding, which scales with all of your plus healing and shielding later on. And then Presence and Cut Down. Now you can go for Guardian build if you want to, but I don't really think you want to do that. You could also go for something like a Revitalize at some point, like Font Revitalize. Revitalize is pretty good on her, but you just really, really want that Presence of Mind. That's part of what makes Yuumi work so well, is that her spells are very expensive, but once you start getting those assists, you get that extra mana pool, you get those mana refunds on the assists, then it's pretty good. And Cut Down, because you're going to have such a low health total anyways, especially if you get Athenes first, you're not going to get much health. You don't need HP when you're attached to people most of the time, so Cut Down does add quite a bit of extra damage, and the more damage that you do, the faster you stack up your Athenes. And then just Frostfang, Athenes, Ardent Censer, Redemption, and Mikhail is what you want on her. Okay, let's move on. So I think she's really good right now. I know Joel T disagrees on the channel, but I think she's good. I'm going to start playing her a bit more, by the way. I'm practicing her right now on my Smurf account, and I am going to try to play some more support. I know people out there really love support. I've had a great time playing jungle over the last month or so, and I'm still going to keep playing jungle, but we will play some more support because I know that people like support on the channel. But anyways, yeah, I think she's really strong. Okay, Soraka. Now, I think Soraka is very good right now as well, and very underrated. Her win rate is fairly high, I think. Let me look at where's support here. She's up there. I don't think she's the highest win rate champ right now, but she's in the conversation, right, at like 52. But they did a couple of buffs to her a few patches ago that I really underestimated, and I've played against her, and she's just super strong. It's kind of like Yuumi. If you just don't deal with her, you're just going to lose late game, and she actually has pretty good trading and harassment early on because they've nerfed Nautilus and Leona so much, and they've nerfed some of the early game, just like chain ganking junglers. You can still do it, but it's a lot riskier than it has been in the past. And really kind of like trying out this new build like with Nimbus Cloak actually makes you quite a bit safer if you take Guardian plus Nimbus Cloak, because that gives you that extra movement speed to get away from ganks early on. Like if you take Nimbus Cloak, it's almost like you get Ghost on the house. Like you get Barrier plus Ghost. It's not quite that extreme, but it feels like it. It feels like you're getting like 2 summoners for 1 if you take Nimbus Cloak. So they gave her extra damage on her Star Call, which is, it adds up. I mean, 10 damage every now and then. It's not like a huge deal, but you do get 2 or 3 points of Star Call in lane. And then the you get a nice reduction in the health cost at earlier levels. So whenever you hit your Q on somebody, then you're getting, it's basically costing you almost no health now whenever you get it. And I don't know what the exact numbers on that are in the early game. I think it's like 5% of your total health. 5% of your max health is what it would typically cost, and now you're getting an extra discount on that. So every time you do it, it's probably saving you 20 or 30 health, but that does add up a lot during the laning phase. They did increase her base mana on 10-8 as well, which isn't a huge deal, but that does allow you to harass a lot more comfortably early on, and the mana cost got reduced back down by 15, and that was pretty huge on 10-8. They also, on 10-6, increased the base heal off of Q by 10, which was pretty handy. And then the bonus movement speed got bumped up by 5% per. And then the cooldown got reduced on this. I forgot they even reduced that cooldown. Mana cost was down on this as well. Okay. So yeah, so they've buffed her quite a bit. So she's had, what is that, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, like 9 buffs over the last 6 patches or so. So that does make her very good. So what is it about Soraka? What's unique about Soraka? Well, a couple of really big things about her. Number one is her healing. Her heal is on a super low cooldown. So it ends up going down to like a 2-second cooldown on this. So that means that you can spam it a lot. So it doesn't look like much. It's like, oh, this is 220 and Yumi's is 210, or like Janna's shield is, 220 or whatever. But the thing is, all of those things have way, way longer cooldowns, right? Like this is just a 2-second cooldown. It's 10% of your maximum health instead of 5. But you end up getting a 100% reduction. And this is so good. Like, this is great in team fights as well, because if you hit one of these astral infusions, then beforehand, in the mid game, you might have 1500 health. So if you heal like 3 different people before, you would take 450 damage for that, right? Because each one's going to be 10% of your 1500 health, 150, right? So that's 450 damage. But now you don't take any damage off of that when you get this maxed out in the mid game. Typically you'll go 2 or 3 points of Q in the laning phase and then max out your W, so you have this ready for those mid game team fights. That's a lot of health. I mean, that's basically giving you 450 effective health, which is like 1,000 gold value. So she is a lot healthier now, a lot healthier in team fights, which makes her much, much more difficult to kill in these really sustained fights, especially if she ends up taking or she ends up using her ult. She takes barrier. She's got Nimbus Cloak. She's healing herself with her Q. She can hit herself with Redemption. So it's very, very difficult to finish her off. And against like hard assassins, you can still go for the Guardian build if you want to. But that's really the biggest thing about her, is it's a very low cost heal, and now it doesn't even really hurt you in team fights. So it ends up being hundreds or thousands of effective health in a lot of team fights with Astral Infusion, so it's pretty good. The other thing is her spells are pretty cheap in the laning phase. You can spam Star Call. If you hit people, this has been nerfed pretty significantly, but it's still really good. I mean, early on, if it's 2 points in this, you deal 120 damage, so it costs 50 mana, and you deal 120 damage with the 60 self-heal on it. So that's, 120 damage, 60 heal, and it ends up having a, 0.65 ratio. So that's really good. Now, that's not what it used to be in the preseason, right? Where it had like a 1.1 ratio or something crazy on it and used to, heal you for way more and all that. But it's still really, really good, right? And it gives you some movement speed too. So you can go in there, hit that Q. Or if you're trying to run away, you hit the Q on somebody and then run. It does make it kind of hard to track her down, because it's going to slow somebody for by 30% for 2 seconds, and it's going to allow you to run away. And whenever you heal somebody, don't forget that this rejuvenation goes on them, so they get the extra healing, right? So if you get 2 points of this in the laning phase and then max your W, it's not just a 220 heal, it's 220 plus 60, which ends up being a 280 heal. So that's another thing that people often forget about. And it also gives them the bonus movement speed for quite a long time. It's over 2.5 seconds. They get that bonus heal, and they get the extra movement speed for that amount of time. So, brings a lot of utility, has a lot of sustain in the laning phase. It can just feel very hopeless. Unless you're an all-in champ, you have to kill her in one rotation or you just lose every fight. Basically, if it's just like a little chip damage, people just go up there and cast spells on each other, land a couple of auto attacks, and back up. Like, she's going to win that almost every time against pretty much everyone except for maybe, like, Sona. But Sona's stuff is a lot more expensive. Like, Sona's heal is, like, 80, and it's a much, much lower heal early on than Soraka's is. So I think that a lot of times Soraka can even match Sona. So if you don't have all-in engage, it's tough. And a lot of people are ganking top lane these days too. You know, they're getting the leash on the bot side, and then they're immediately going top. So that means that you're just kind of get free reign a lot of times for the first, you know, however long, first 5 minutes of the game, 4 or 5 minutes of the game, you just get to push in and just harass them a lot of the times. Because there are very few junglers that are going for the cheese level 2 ganks because it's so risky. If it doesn't work out, then you're so far behind the enemy jungler. And there's not that catch-up experience anymore. So that's really stopped a lot of the more predatory ganking patterns that were going on in the preseason, where everyone would just like start chain camping bottom from like level 2 or level 3. So that makes some of these early harassment champions, like a Soraka, even stronger in the early game. And the other thing that really sets her apart is the Wish. So this thing is just so powerful. It's across the entire map. You can basically turn around almost any fight that's even remotely close with this Wish. It heals for a ton. If someone's below 40%, you get 50% extra healing. It also does apply your Athenes across the map when you heal somebody. So if you get an Athenes early on and you know, you're healing them for 225 plus 82% of your AP, your Athenes is charged up to 250. Then, you know, all of a sudden you're healing them for like 500 before you're plus healing and shielding, and it'll be like, oh my god, it just healed them for like half of their bar of health. So that is something that is just super, super strong, that you can just basically roam anywhere on the map anytime. I mean, this is why Karthus was so strong for a long time in the preseason and before, was because you just had all of this pressure all over the whole map and you just power farmed. Well, it's almost the same thing as Soraka. You can afford to just hang out with your ADC or whoever else. You know, you don't have to risk roaming, and you can just press ult. And this hits everybody on your team, right? And it can't miss. So even if they do like a Zanya's or something, it still hits them. Even if they're untargetable. Does not invalidate the targeting of this heal. So even if they're Vlad pulled or Zanya'd or, you know, Fizz is on his Trident or whatever, they're still going to get the heal. So it's super, super strong, and it heals herself. So, you know, when you're trying to dive her in a team fight and everyone else is taking damage, she just pops Wish, saves herself, and instantly saves everyone else. And a really nice thing about this, too, is that you can get a lot of, like, assists across the map very quickly with this as well. Which allows you to stack up your ulti hunter. Sadie, stop. It allows you to stack up your ulti hunter and get this on a really low cooldown, so you can get up to 25% cooldown off of this as well. So it's just very, very powerful. It can influence the whole map. So you're pretty good at just trading in lane. You can definitely bully people out. You got to be careful against things like Leona if you run into that, but almost anything else you can probably work around. Yeah, good harass, excellent scaling. It's such a low cooldown. Just your healing output is insane over time, and you have this like huge global pressure that also scales, and you have all the item things that we talked about with Yuumi that make her really strong in general. So she's very difficult to deal with. Even if they have like a Morello's or an Executioner's or whatever, you're still going to be healing for a ton, right? Yes, it's going to reduce your healing by 40%, but like it's still going to be really, really good over time. And you got to remember that like in the laning phase, sometimes people rush Executioners against her, which is okay, but she can still heal, right? Like, you can just wait until the Executioner's debuff falls off and then just heal them. Yes, it's nice if it's empowered with the Q, but you still have a 220 heal. If you just need to throw a couple of normal heals on them, you can do that. So they increased her healing amount by a pretty good chunk. They just decreased the amount that you get off of the Star Call. So anyways, very strong right now. I recommend Airy Nimbus Cloak if you can get away with it. Airy Nimbus Cloak, Absolute Focus, Scorch, then Taste of Blood, Ulti Hunter. You can also do Transcendence, but I feel like with the extra Star Call healing, if you are taking Taste of Blood as well, you've got some potions if you're going for an extra Chalice and you're going to build that into Athenes. I think you can keep your health above 70% in a lot of matchups to trigger the absolute focus. And then later on in the game, you know, when you're coming in, you're going to be relatively full health, and you don't hurt yourself as much anymore. So if you're landing that Q in team fights, you can still stay above 70% spamming your heal because the health cost is going to be reduced. So in the past, you never wanted to go absolute focus because you were always going to be low in health in team fights. But that's not necessarily the case with sort of modern day Soraka. So Transcendence is good, but it doesn't come online until level 10, and I think I would just rather have a little bit more early game harassment and just have, you know, a little bit more of that team fight power. So I think that's really good. Taste of Blood is kind of a no-brainer, and I think Ulti Hunter is extremely good. Now, with this build, you are missing Revitalize, which is super strong on Soraka. It does give 5% plus healing and shielding, an extra 10% if they're below 40% health. So I do kind of miss Revitalize, but I ultimately think that this Ulti Hunter is so strong because you can use it like pretty much on cooldown in solo queue. Someone's going to get into a fight, and you can influence that fight and help your team win. And it's just such a game-breaking ultimate that you just really want that up all the time. The other option, if they do have a lot of assassins, and this is what I had run a lot in the preseason, you can run Guardian early on, which will help because Guardian gives you a shield. Aerie never shields you. You have Font of Life, which allows you to spread around your Ardent Sensor buff a little bit more if you want to do that. Conditioning can give you some extra survivability with your stats, and then you have Revitalize as well. But that is good, but I'm telling you, the Nimbus Cloak, it just really comes in handy big time, especially with something like if you're taking Barrier, which is a fairly low cooldown summoner. I think it's like 180 seconds, might be 200 seconds. Really low cooldown and just gets you out of a lot of situations. The other kind of new thing that I've been doing with her a lot is Boots of Swiftness, which helps a ton with your positioning in team fights and just running away from people that are chasing you. They did a pretty decent buff to Boots of Swiftness a few patches ago, and they nerfed mobility boots. That's another thing. The nerf to mobility boots really has added up, and it's hurt things like Leona and Nautilus. I mean, 100 extra gold doesn't seem like a lot, but it is definitely affecting them. And she never wanted those in the first place because, you know, she's not going to be roaming a lot. You can just use your ult to roam, and so having that extra mobility in team fights is pretty huge. You can also go for a defensive boot if they're like very heavily weighted towards, you know, magic damage or physical damage. You can get a defensive boot if you want, but I think that Swiftness is really good, especially because you get this extra movement speed off of the Q. And then just Athene's, it's so powerful with your ultimate, adds on just that huge amount of burst heal if that's what you need. And then Redemption, Mikhail's, and Ardent Sensor, you can kind of feel out and see what you want, but I think that Athene's plus Redemption is kind of the way to go. I did like Mikhail's a lot in the past, and you can still go that if they have a lot of CC, so if they have like a Varus or an Ashe, maybe a Leona, something like that, you can still go Mikhail's and feel pretty good about it. It's not going to have as much burst healing as Athene's, and it's not going to have the offense early on, so you're not going to get as much harassment out of it. But you know, having that cleanse is a very big deal, and she does scale extremely well with plus healing and shielding, and that's going to help your redemption really hit like a truck because your redemption gets triple the value out of your plus healing and shielding. So that is another decent option if that's something that you need down the line. Okay, so Soraka going to be really strong right now. Lulu's another one, and I'll speed it up a bit here. I just want to talk about the top two because I really do think these two in particular are kind of head and shoulders over a lot of the other ones. But we'll talk about some of the other ones. So Lulu is very good. I think she's the highest win rate right now, or she's close. Actually, she's a little bit under Soraka. But she's still going to be really good. Now, I do personally think that Yuumi has kind of replaced Lulu. Yuumi is banned a lot, though, as you saw. So, you know, you aren't always going to have the option of playing her. But Lulu has really nice CC. But like the big, and she does add a lot of extra scaling, especially to on-hit champions that are going to be getting a lot of attack speed. So things that are going to be getting Blather and King, stuff that's going to be getting Hurricane. She's going to be really good for that. So like Twitch, on-hit Varus, which a lot of people don't do that these days. Kog'Maw famously is really good with her. Something like Vayne would be really good with her. Kai'Sa's probably pretty good with her. So, you know, the marquee thing about Lulu is her whimsy. It does CC people. You can polymorph someone for up to 2.25 seconds, which is pretty huge. It's pretty close to a Fiddlesticks Fear. Or you can give the attack speed and the movement speed. So you have to choose. do you want to give an ally attack speed and movement speed, or do you want to polymorph an enemy for 2.25 seconds? You can't do both. And I think that's the huge problem right now with Lulu, if there is a problem with Lulu, is that her best skill doesn't work on two different champs, or like you have to choose one mode. You can't do both modes with it. And it's on a long cooldown. 12 seconds is a very long cooldown for something like that. Versus if you think about Yuumi, with Yuumi, you give them bonus attack speed and bonus movement speed, and you heal them, and it's on an 8-second cooldown. So, because realistically, I mean, like, you can polymorph, but if you polymorph, you're giving up a whole lot of extra power for your team by not giving out that movement speed and that attack speed. So it's like, yeah, you can polymorph the Master Yi or something that's running in, but then your Vayne's not going to get her buff with all the extra damage. So, like, it's a really good ability, and it's cool that it's modular. It's just a lot of the time, you're just giving up a lot of Lulu's potential power because you can't do everything. You have to pick one of them. I really wish they would at least put like the bonus attack speed on her shield. So if you shielded an ally, they would get that bonus attack speed up to 45%. Maybe that's too strong, but I would rather see that. Then your choice would be, okay, do I want to give movement speed to an ally, or do I want to polymorph? And I think that's a more realistic choice. But anyway, so that's a problem with her. She has kind of long cooldowns. Now, they have buffed her up, too. They took her up to a 240 on the shield, and they made it an 8-second cooldown instead of a 10-second cooldown. This did move her win rate up quite a bit. So she does have a nice point-click shield early on. It's pretty solid harassment. So you can comfortably level this up, or at least get 3 points of it in the laning phase for harassment. And it also doubles as that shield for the mid-game team fight. So that is really nice that the same ability is your laning ability and your team fighting ability. It does reveal champions, which is really nice. So I don't know if it reveals... I'm like 99% sure it reveals like Vayne and other types of invisible champs, although I don't think it would reveal like a Kali. Not 100% about that. But I'm pretty sure it reveals like Vayne, and like 100% it reveals Twitch. But things like Vayne, Shaco, stuff like that. So it's just a little trick that can work Teemo. I'm pretty sure it would stay on Teemo and reveal him as well. No, it only reveals him for 2.5 seconds, but it's nice. And whenever you E them, then they get this like on attack extra damage, which ends up becoming pretty real. I mean, at level 9, if you have 100 ability power, which is not that uncommon, then you'd get 78 extra on-hit damage. So every time they attack, or on-attack damage, every time they attack, it does 78 extra damage. That's why I'm saying that champs that have a lot of attack speed are really good with Lulu, because you can get the Ardent Sensor buff, you can get Lulu's own buff with Whimsy if you put that on him for 45% attack speed. So that's going to take it up. I think Ardent is usually somewhere in the neighborhood of like 25% extra attack speed. You can take that up to 70% extra attack speed, and each attack's doing like 80 extra damage. So it doesn't double proc with Gensu's. Each Hurricane Bolt does not apply it because it's on attack, not on hit. But nevertheless, it's still a really, really good combination. That's why she typically gets played with things like Kog'Maw, Twitch, Vayne, stuff like that that has a lot of attack speed. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much her. And then her ult is on a low cooldown, only 110 seconds, which is nice. And it's just a good burst infusion of health. Gets around Ignite, gets around Grievous Wounds. They just always get that amount of health. And it's a pretty good chunk. The base amount is pretty good. It's 300, 450, 600. And that knockup is nice for things like Yasuo, or just to add a little bit of extra CC to the chain. And it does apply, I think, 7 seconds of a slow. Yeah, a slow for 7 seconds, up to 30%. So that can allow something like an Olaf to stick to somebody, Darius, Garen. This adds a nice little buff to people. With 900 range. So the main drawbacks of Lulu, the biggest thing is she doesn't scale that well with plus healing and shielding, because her ult is an infusion of health, it's not a heal. So it does get around Grievous Wounds, but if you have 20% plus healing and shielding, it does not apply to that. It doesn't give you any extra bonus health. And her AP ratios are fairly low on her heals. So this is a 0.5 on this one, and her shield is a 0.6, which is not abysmal. It's okay. It's better than Yuumi's, but it still is going to have some problems. And her Q just basically doesn't exist as an ability outside the laning phase. Like, you get a very small, slow but it's not really that fantastic. So she's okay, and you know her raw scaling can be pretty good, but you know the plus alien shielding not as awesome on her as it is on some other champs. Also, this is single target. Remember, you know, like Yuumi can comfortably stun multiple people in team fights. Sona can stun multiple people in team fights. Soraka heals her whole team with her ult. You know, Janna can heal a ton of people with her ult. But Wild Growth is just single target, right? Her CC is single target on Whimsy. Her, you know, Infusion of Health is single target. So in big time team fights, she can get outscaled if you don't have a hyper carry like that Vayne or like that Kog'Maw that's just going off. So your power is very much so, you know, more concentrated in a single person than other people. And she's pretty vulnerable, you know. She doesn't have as many defensive tools. Like, yes, she can Wild Growth and herself and help picks herself and, like, polymorph somebody coming at her. So she has a couple of things, couple of tools in her toolkit. But she can still be focused out and killed. She has pretty low base movement speed, I think. I guess 330. It's not the lowest in the game, but it's not great. And so, you know, and once again, if you are, you know, whimsying to try to run away, if you're casting that on yourself, that means you're not casting it on your carries, you know, to help them get extra damage. So she's pretty good. Also, her ranges are really close compared to other enchanters. If you play her, you'll definitely notice those. Like, her harassment range is like 650 here with help picks. You have to walk up, try to get that. So that can be a problem against things like Caitlyn, Senna, Ashe. They might be able to hit you back consistently. And her Whimsy is 650, so you got to get pretty close to the action to be effective with her, which can be a little spooky, especially if the enemy has, like, assassins or, like, a bunch of AoE damage. You just get hit by random stuff like a Mumu ults and things like that. That could be a problem, but she is going to be really strong right now. So I think Ionian Boots, Frostfang, Athene's Ardent, maybe Shirelia's, or Redemption can be pretty strong on her. I like Ionians just because, once again, your marquee spell here is 12 seconds, which feels pretty long compared to some of the other champs. You know, like Yuumi is 8 seconds, and you can definitely feel the difference on that. So I think Ionians are pretty good. You could also try out Swiftness or a defensive boot if you want to. Would not do mobility boots on her. Okay, Janna's another one, and I'll go through these. I know we only have like 13 minutes left, so I'll go through these a bit faster here. Janna did just get a nerf on this patch. Her W, I think the damage got toned down by 10 or so during the laning phase, so she does have a point click. It's very similar to Lulu's, about 650 range. Pretty good harassment tool. So you just walk up W, you know, auto attack. You still have your tornado ready if you need to disengage. And then she scales pretty hard later on in the game. The biggest thing about Janna is her shield also gives out AD. So you want to put that on champions that have really good AD ratios or champions that get critical strike. Crit is the best because if you're giving out a shield that gives 50 AD, which is pretty common on a Janna shield, and they auto attack and crit with that, then all of a sudden it's 100 extra damage instead of 50 extra damage. And if they have Infinity Edge, then it's going to be even more, like 125 damage. So that that means that she scales really well with those critical strike champs. So things like Jinx, who's going to get Infinity Edge, and those rockets, rockets with the Hurricane, and now Ashe is different because Ashe's critical strikes turn into critical slows, and so she doesn't get extra damage off of her crits. So it's not as good with Ashe, but like most other crit champions are really going to like Janna. So is really solid. Her ult is a good reset, so if they have a bunch of divers, a bunch of meatballs, which is very common right now, you've got a lot of sets, Garen's, Darius's, you know, stuff like that flying around, and the fact that she can push them all back and heal her team for a ton is very nice. It is a bit tough in the laning phase because you don't have a heal, so you can get busted up. I think her matchup against Soraka and Yuumi is pretty poor, so you got to be careful with that, but she is going to have a better matchup against something like a Leona, a Nautilus, or any of these other hard engaged champs, which are still fairly popular. Janet's going to have a good matchup into those. So she can harass really well early. She scales pretty well into the late game. She's got her shield. She has her ult. But she is going to be a little bit safer because she moves quickly. She has pretty good ranges on her abilities. And she just has a lot of disengage with her tornado and her ult. So it's just really hard to get on her or to get on other people and get some kills. So I do think that Janna is going to be pretty strong. And then you just want to run. Some people run Comet on her to harass with a W. I think that's a bit too hardcore early on. Aery's fine. It's a little bit less damage than Comet, but it does scale better. You know, it does affect your heals later on in the game, has a better ratio. You can activate it much more often. So, I mean, if you're activating Aery twice every time you would be able to activate a Comet, then it still does more damage in the laning phase, I believe. I'm not 100% sure on that math, but it's pretty close. So I just like Aery a little bit more on her, and then just Taste of Blood, and you can do like a Relentless Hunter if you do want to get the extra movement speed on her, but I'd probably still just go with Ulti Hunter, just kind of my go-to rune. You know, just because you do have a pretty powerful ultimate. You can't use it proactively as much as like a Yuumi or a Soraka could. Soraka, like, you are reacting, but the fact that you can react to anything on the map is in itself kind of proactive to a certain extent. At least it's going to be used. Like, it's not going to be sitting there off cooldown for long periods of time if you're a Soraka. Janna, you might sit there with it off cooldown for a while because you're waiting for the right moment. So I still think that's a pretty good way to go. You could also do something like Font of Life Revitalize on her if you want to. That does help you spread out your Ardent Sensor buffs a little bit more. Because if you put a slow on somebody with your W, it puts that debuff on them for Font, and then anyone that auto-attacks that person is going to get the Ardent Sensor buff, because the heal that comes from that Font of Life debuff counts as a heal from you. So that's another option that could be decent in there. Malachi's another one that I think is still pretty good. He's probably my favorite engage still. Now, they did nerf his mana cost a little bit. They did take it down and made it cost 10 more. But it's still good. He has great scouting with his seeds. His W cannot be dodged, so, you know, Janna can't, you know, blow somebody back. Yuumi can't, like, stun you out of it. It's just always going to get on somebody. So the Flash W is pretty much, like, insta-kill if the jungler comes down there. You do have a really powerful ult on a fairly short cooldown. It's going to hit a ton of people in fights. You know, those seeds are really good at scouting bushes. It's basically like free wards that last for quite a long time. They also do some pretty respectable damage early on. It's like 12% of somebody's max health, might be 14%. It's a lot. And you do have your Arcane Smash, which is a really good sort of disengage tool against a lot of these hard engaged champs out there. So I think Malachi is really underrated. He's the champion that pretty much put me over the top this season into Diamond when I started playing him a couple of months ago. So I still think he is very good. It is just tough because you can just get outscaled by Yuumi, Soraka, like all of the ladies up there. You know, the enchanters, if you don't deal with them early, if they get like 2 items, it's probably lights out and you're probably going to lose the game. So that is kind of rough, but if you can push your advantage early, if you do have a very aggressive lane, you know, in the bot lane, you have like a Draven or a Misfortune. I've not seen a lot of Misfortune lately. But if you do have aggressive things in the bot lane, then he can be pretty strong. Okay, final few champs here. So Bard is still pretty good. He has a high win rate. I'm just never, like, it's just really hard for me to put Bard that high up there because he is so conditional. Like, you gotta land your stuns, you gotta get like really good quality ults. I have seen some Bards completely take over the game and be a total menace. So he can definitely work really well, but I think he requires a lot of practice. If you're not very well practiced on Bard, it's not going to work out very well for you in terms of wins. So you got to practice him a lot. But he does have some interesting tools. You can rotate around the map. It does help out with ganks, with your tunnels. You can catch people off guard. You do a pretty good amount of base damage with your meeps. That slow adds quite a bit of utility. Sadie, stop. She keeps like trying to paw my hand. I'll feed you after we do this. So he does have a lot of utility to him, but his scaling, like his guaranteed sort of stat stick style, like I was talking about before, Soraka and Yuumi, is just not there. You know, his ult does no damage, his tunnels do no damage, no healing. His W is pretty low amount of healing, pretty low amount of utility. It's really just his auto attacks that do the damage, and it's like it does add up. It does add up for sure, but I don't know. I just think he's a bit too conditional, and I know a lot of people are really enjoying kind of the Bard build or whatever. Looks like a lot of people aren't going for kind of the troll build with him, where you get the like the Dead Man's Plate rapid fire cannon. Like that can work. It's very expensive. But you just got to close out the game fast. I mean, as you can see here, like this chart, he just falls off because he just doesn't scale. So I don't know. Like, you can snowball the game right now, but I think the game is definitely slowed down quite a bit from where it was sort of early in the season, in the preseason. And I think that just opened it up for the enchanters to really start to take over. So you better pressure them. You better apply, you know, a lot of pressure in the early game if you really want to do well with Bard. So he's okay, but you better practice him a lot. Okay, Nami did get nerfed a little bit a few patches ago, but the nerf to her passive was actually quite significant. I tried playing her with that nerf, and the movement speed is significantly lower. So she is still good. You can still apply like some nice harassment in the early game, but it just feels like she gets outscaled a lot by the Yuumi, by the Soraka, by the Lulu, and people just, it feels like they're just not playing the really aggressive like ADCs that you need to play if you're gonna play like one of those all-in early game type of champs, right? So like the Bard, the Nami, the Zyras, the Brands. Like, it just feels like, I mean, maybe I'm wrong on that, but it feels like people just aren't playing those champs. I mean, look at these champs. Like, Ezreal, Kai'Sa, and Vayne are the most popular picks by quite a large margin, and none of them have a very strong early game presence. And the ADCs are still pretty weak despite the buffs. They're still pretty weak in the early game. Caitlyn, you know, if it's Challenger Caitlyn, yes, applies a lot of pressure, can do very well. If it's like Silver Caitlyn or Gold Caitlyn, she's just going to AFK farm at max range, right? And just not apply a lot of pressure. And I feel like that's a lot of the issue in, like, Gold and the games I've been playing in Smurf lately. And even, you know, from what I remember of Platinum, is that a lot of people just are not aggressive enough. They just do not trade. They don't step up. Half the time when I'm the support, I'm up there doing all of the harassing, and they're sitting there watching me just farming. And, you know, that's okay if you're someone like Yuumi or Soraka or Lulu. It's like, all right, you know, it'd be cool if they harass with me, but at least, you know, I just have guaranteed scaling just in case they don't do that. But if you're playing something like Bard or Nami, you don't have that luxury, right? If you're playing against a Soraka, you're playing against like Soraka Vayne or something, and, you know, you picked like Yuumi and they picked Ezreal, like, you know, that's good in pro, that's very safe, very powerful in pro play, but it's going to be very, very tough for you. Or like, I guess if you picked, in that analogy, you'd be picking like the Nami, since we're talking about Nami here. Like Nami, Ezreal, like, he's probably not going to help you harass enough to counteract the fact that you're going to get outscaled, right? So there are some champs that can make that happen. It's just Misfortune's fallen off quite a bit. So she was one who is very aggressive and good. Draven is one. Lucian usually is pretty aggressive. He has a fairly low win rate, but he'll step up and do some damage with you. He's very good with Nami. Aphelios can do some stuff early. Jin's usually pretty aggressive. So there are some options in there, but I feel like there's just not enough exigencies, you might say, in the rhetoric class. Not enough exigency on the behalf of a lot of ADCs to make that happen. So people just don't feel that sense of urgency. People just don't, like, they just won't trade with you enough to make it work. Because here's the thing, like, yeah, Nami does trade well, but it's like Yuumi trades, Soraka trades not quite as well as Nami does if it's like all in and everyone's going hard, but it's still like pretty good, and they just scale way better than she does. So Nami's okay, but I think the nerf took a lot of her utility out. Like, the movement speed, being able to spread that movement speed around to everybody was a pretty big deal. And she still has it, but it's just not as good as it was. Excuse me. Okay, Recon. So I still think Recon can be really good, but a lot of people just don't play him well enough. Xayah is very bad right now as an ADC. She's been coming up a little bit more lately, but she's still not that great. She's really hard for people to play. Recon, in theory, can engage sort of well against some of these champs, but he's going to get outscaled a lot of the times by the Yuumi, the Soraka, and stuff like that. So if you're really good on Bard, you know, you can make him work, or not Bard, Recon, you can make him work. I still like him. He's still a very fun champion. You can roam around. If you get some really good plays off your roams, it's good. But he was also hurt a little bit by the mobility boot nerf. He does like Swiftness too. But it just feels like we're kind of entering into a, like, hyper scaling meta right now with some of these, like, some of the most common stuff in the other lanes right now are these just like mega tanks with just like 1 billion healing that are impossible to kill, right? It's like Red Cane, Darius, who else? It's just like everyone and their mother is taking like Conqueror, Ravenous Hunter, Death's Dance, and like Spirit Visage, right? Like almost everybody is playing just any bruiser champion they can think of that can run, you know, as many of those things that I just mentioned as possible. And in that scenario, fights are just getting dragged out, games are going longer, and all of that stuff, especially if they get a Spirit Visage, scales so well with healing from like Yuumi and Soraka. It's just ridiculous. Like you're never gonna kill Red Cane if like a Yuumi's attached to him and he has a Spirit Visage, you know, Death's Dance, Ravenous, all that stuff. You're just never gonna kill him. It doesn't even matter if you have Grievous Wounds. It's just not happening. So that's kind of the meta that we're going towards, I think, right now, is just the mega tanks with just absurd healing until they nerf those runes. And it's just hard for Recon to deal with that, because if you hard engage into that, it's like, okay, you just engaged on top of them, but your team can't kill them in time. You lose a lot of your value as Recon, because you can still function, you still have your shield, you can still do stuff, but you have longer cooldowns, and you're just not going to be able to keep up a lot of times with some of the ladies up there in terms of overall team contributions in, like, you know, 15-second fights versus like 3-second fights, right? When you engage, you pick somebody, you kill them, and then your team runs down the rest of the people, which is what kind of has been happening for the last, or for like the first half of the season. That's sort of what was up, but now it's been shifting after they reworked Death's Dance, and, you know, they've dialed back some of the assassins and things like that. Then you know, people are slowly gravitating towards like these longer fights, and a little bit longer games, and that really favors enchanters. Okay, Blitzcrank, still good. You land your hook, you're a god. You miss your hook, you're completely worthless. He's just way too one-dimensional for me. You know, you just won't find me consistently playing Blitz, but nevertheless, he's very good. You know, against something like a Soraka or a Yuumi, he is a person who can do enough burst damage, especially early on, to kill those champions. So he can definitely be a threat. He can definitely be really good. Now, he is banned quite a bit too, and he's not that great against tanks, but overall, he is pretty good against a lot of those top-end champions, so definitely consider him. And then Leona is like a better, well, I'm going to put Leona a little bit above that, because I think she is a better Blitzcrank in some ways. It's very similar. Like, you can't hook people totally out of position. Like, you can't pull them to you like Blitzcrank does, but she does do more. She does have more CC. She's just a lot more reliable with her ult later on, and she can just snowball and hard punish. If she can stay even or a little bit ahead, then she can take over the game. I mean, you know, if you can get a hold of something like the Soraka or the Yuumi, she's the type of champ that can actually get those kills, that can convert. She still has pretty good damage. The fact that her ult is on such a low cooldown, you can blow their flash with the first ult, and then it's right back up 90 seconds later. So I think she has enough aggression, but she's risky, you know? If you don't convert, if your Caitlyn just sits there and watches you and doesn't do anything, if you go in, you're gonna die, and if your team falls behind, you can feel really worthless, because it's just too scary to go in all the way by yourself. Versus a Blitz, even if you're behind, you could get that pick, right? You can land the hook, pull them out of position, maybe get a pick, even if your team's really far behind. So, I don't know. They're about even. They're both kind of tier 2-ish, I think. And then the final few here, Sona, I think, is going to be pretty good. She does have one of the higher win rates. I think she's even a higher win rate than Soraka right now. But in my mind, she's just not quite as safe. You know, Soraka can heal herself for a ton with her ult. She can get movement speed with her Q and heal herself with her Q on a fairly low cooldown. So I tend to, and Soraka has better mana management early on, and she has the global presence too with that ult. That's so huge. If you're good at watching the minimap and interpreting fights, that global ult on Soraka is just absolutely massive if you get good on that. So that's why I tend to like Soraka a little bit more. But Sona, you know, she does have the ultimate, which is good teamfight tool. She does, you know, put up really big numbers in a clean 5v5 where everybody's there. You're spamming that W. The amount of shields that you put out, the amount of healing just is unrivaled. No one's going to be able to keep up with you. Yes, Soraka does have a low cooldown, 2-second, single target heal. But Sona's is going to be like 3 seconds, and you can shield up to like 5 different people. It also allows you to get around Grievous Wounds a little bit more because your W is partially a heal and partially a shield. The shield does not get reduced by the Grievous Wounds. So, pretty good overall. Solid abuser of Athene's Unholy Grail, too. You do quite a bit of damage in fights just with Q and auto attack. You fill up that Grail really quickly so you can redistribute those heals with your W. So, she is going to be really strong. I just think that she's one of the most vulnerable ones. She doesn't have any, like, real CC. Outside of her ult to help you. Like, she's got a slow on her E, but if a Talon's running at you, a Zed's running at you, you're probably dead. Right? I mean, with a lot of enchanters, you're probably dead. But Sona specifically feels like you just don't have that many options if you get flanked or if there's a diver coming at you. You know, once again, Soraka's not great at that, but at least she heals herself and can kind of speed herself up. I know Sona can too with her E, but Soraka just feels a little bit more resilient to me than Sona, but maybe I'm just biased there. I don't know. Anyway, Sona's okay. I just feel like I'd just rather play Soraka or I'd rather play Yuumi, but Sona can be pretty strong. Pyke is good if you land those hooks, if you can convert, get those kills early. It's just his items are a little bit more expensive, and if someone like a Soraka or a Yuumi is just healing people up pretty consistently, it can get hard. It can be difficult to get into that execute range. But he does roam really well. You know, the mobility boot nerf does hurt him, but he still roams really well. He can still convert. He can get kills. He's kind of the king of vision with Umbral Glaive and the ability to go invisible. He can get around wards. He's effectively got double sweeper with his normal sweeper plus Umbral. So Pyke definitely can snowball out of control. I'm sure we've all seen it. It's just a little bit riskier than it has been in the past. Nautilus, still going to be strong. I've got him down here a little bit more just because his damage and his ult are just... You could make it work, but it just feels like it's not quite enough a lot of the time to punch through the Yuumi and the Soraka and just all their nonsense. If they take Barrier, Nimbus Cloak, you know, all of their healing and shielding and displacements and all of that stuff, it just feels like it's kind of difficult to convert those kills early on. Like, you can do it, but it's just like, it's not as much as it used to be, and I feel like it's not as much as Leona. Like, Leona has a shorter cooldown on her ult, and I'm pretty sure her full rotation does a little bit more damage than Nautilus. So he's still really good, but I just feel like the enchant, unless you're just really on it, you're like duoed with a Draven that's like hardcore committed to shutting down this Soraka and this Yuumi in this lane. If you got like a beta ADC that's like not helping you out, then you're going to have a bad time, I think, in the bot lane right now. And then Zyra and Brand are kind of interchangeable in my mind. Brand's going to be a lot better against melee. Zyra offers better, more consistent poke in the laning phase and better vision control, but they build same kind of items. They have the same kind of outputs. It's like they are good if they get ahead, if they get those kills, but if you don't convert, if the Soraka or the Yuumi or just whatever enchanter gets ahead, it's very, very difficult to catch up because they're buying 2,100 gold items. You know, you're buying 3,000 gold items. It's not that hard to figure out the math that you're going to fall really far behind. And just the nature of the scaling on plus healing and shielding versus magic damage is not really in your favor. So, yes, if you give a Brand like 6 items and you give a Soraka 6 items, Brand might, you know, be able to keep up and be more effective. But Brand with 6 items is going to cost like, I don't know, 20,000 gold. And Soraka with 6 items is going to be like 12,000. So, probably not even that much. But anyway, so they're risky. They can pay off. But I did play a Zyra game, I think, the other day. It was pretty good, but it's really hard to convert. And they can also be picked off and killed in skirmishes, right? So they have even less tools. Unless you can turn around and just kill somebody coming at you, then you're just not going to have access to as many sort of defensive tools as some of the enchanters have. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank y'all very much. Hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check out the rest of the content on the channel. Come by, check out the stream around midnight every night. We'd love to have you. I try to be as conversational as possible. It's chill, very friendly community. And yeah, see you next time. Have a good day.